to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I fought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dana Gould Hour podcast. It's April, which can mean only one thing. It's time for our March episode. Phil Hendrie is here. Phil Hendrie is a genius, and if you are unfamiliar with his work, I am delighted that you get to learn about him from me. He started out as a standard FM rock DJ, he moved into talk radio, and then perfected his own very unique, very specific, very, very hilarious The Phil Hendrie Show. And now his podcast, The World of Phil Hendrie. There is a new documentary out about him called, quite simply, Hendrie, that will either introduce you to his incredible talent or will reinforce your appreciation of it. If you don't know what he does, stay tuned. It's fantastic. Phil Hendrie. So happy to have him on. Additionally, we have nothing short of a broadcasting legend, George Schlatter, who reinvented how sketch comedy is presented on television with the legendary television series Laugh-In. He produced series and specials for Cher, Mohammad Ali, Frank Sinatra. He is 93 years old and still going strong, and he has a new book out entitled Still Laughing, A Life in Comedy. And he is here to talk about that, George Schlatter. True Tales from Weirdsville takes you into the world of another legend, cinematic legend, Roger Corman. And we follow his career from The Creature from the Haunted Sea up through his two late 60s counterculture epics, The Wild Angels and The Trip. Couple of announcements. I was presented with the idea of what are being called dynamic ads. Now, these are ads that I don't have to read that are placed into the show. Now, as I've said, this show is brought to you by you. We are paid for by our Patreon subscribers. And as we always say, if you like the show, go to danagould.com and become a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. $5 a month. And you get some extra audio content, some video content, and some occasional junk. We don't have graduated levels. $5 a month. A simple deal for complicated times. And now, you may possibly hear a short ad or two dropped in here and there. It's just to help pay for the show. This is a break-even venture. No one's getting rich on the Dana Gould Hour. But people like it, and I'm happy to keep doing it. And we will always post an ad-free version to our Patreon page. Lastly, but most importantly, by far, I wanted to say something a little personal. In between this episode and our last episode, I lost my mother. She'd been quite ill for a long time. So it wasn't a surprise, but it's still, it's your mom. She was a great lady. My mother, incredibly kind-hearted, profoundly empathetic, and really took care of me. Realized that I had a obsession with comedy, nurtured it, made room for me in our big family, took me to see George Carlin when I was 16. She was aces, and we all miss her terribly. But I did want to take a moment to bring that to your attention. And, I consider you family. So thank you for indulging me on that. And now it's time for our filthy business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free and worth it.
It's a beautiful sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California. Spring is here. And I get to talk to one of my comedy heroes today. One of the things that I remind myself as I move through my storied career, is I gauge my success by the people that I look up to that I know. And this gentleman is in that drawer, that small drawer. He is a broadcasting legend, and he has a new documentary out called, I believe, Hendrie.
Yep. That's what they call it. That's the guys that Pat and Jordan named it.
Right. This is the creator of the legendary Phil Hendrie Show, and now the creator of the podcast, The World of Phil Hendrie. Isn't that daily?
It's daily, but two of them are what we call encores from last year.
Right. And it's about 30 minutes on 30 average. Minutes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's perfect. It's perfect with all of my in between my news and spy novel podcasts. It's the perfect aperitif.
Who can spend more time than that, you know? Please
welcome the great Phil Hendrie. Hi, Phil.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, brother. Good to see you again, man.
Nice to see you. Now, for those of you who are familiar, these names should be familiar to you. Jay Santos, Bobby Dooley, Lloyd Bonafide, Herb Sewell, Sewell, yeah. R.C. Collins.
That's right.
One of my favorites. For those people who are unfamiliar with Phil's work, it's all explained in this documentary, Hendrie, but Phil did something that that no one had done. And when you heard it, you couldn't believe it. And I'm going to give a little background. I'm going to ask Phil to just bear with me for 60 seconds while I tell you the story. Uses the late 90s, about 96, 97. David Cross, who's a friend of mine, very famous comedian, said, I was driving and I heard this radio show, and you have to listen to this thing. It was insane. And it can't be real. It can't be real. And then I listened, and I had the same response. It sounded like a scripted parody of a talk radio show, but there was no indication that it was anything but real. We devised over time that it was fake, but the idea that it was only one person came later and obliterated our sanity. At the height of talk radio, when terrestrial radio was before the internet, when terrestrial radio was all of it, you had, after traveling around the country and building this show slowly, this show on drive time in Los Angeles or early evenings, the Phil Hendrie Show, where for 3 hours a day,
3. Mm-hmm.
You would
I think they had me at 4 at one time. They put me at 4, and I talked them out of it. I said, it's really too long.
Yeah.
3 is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And you would take guests whose would appear to be rational, sane people for about half an act. And then it would start to quite brilliantly, slowly unspool, and people would call in, and
I played the guest. Yeah. And then we had real callers, real people calling and saying, this guy, thinking the guy was real.
Right.
And the premise is what would hook them. Yeah.
Bobby Dooley from the Western Estates Homeowners Association talking about the cat problem in their neighborhood and the cats having sex in the yard. And the question that we're asking right now is whether this sex between the cats is consensual or not, pleasurable. But a lot of people maintaining there's no such thing in the cat world.
If you're a mother, Phil, and you care about your children, I think you have to take everything into consideration.
Well, anyway, her husband's been shooting these animals, and it's gotten a lot of people upset because some of these cats are pets.
And these cats also, Phil, I think, set a poor example for my daughter. The behavior is very slut-like. It's just something that I don't want her to see at this stage of her life.
Hollywood on KFI AM 640. Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment quickly. Like everyone else has been saying, cats do not have consensual sex. The female cat excretes a scent when they're in heat, and the male is attracted to that. It's that simple. It's all part of animal behavior. It's instinctual for them.
If you're saying that cats do not have consensual sex, then there must be some equivalent of rape. Or date.
It's instinctual for them. You like the other.
What do you mean?
You're attaching a human behavior to an animal.
Well, but the date rape that we were talking about.
Date rape is something that happens between human beings.
Yeah, date rape is not the term. If you're saying rape, cats can't rape each other.
So yeah, that's you interviewing you, cutting you off, cutting yourself off. And at the time when the terrestrial show, before the podcast, when the terrestrial show was at its peak, it was when I was working on The Simpsons. And that's a very deep bench of talented people in that writer's room. You know, just George Meyer, Max Prost, Tom Gamble, Mike Scully, Matt Selman. I mean, these really, nobody's messing around in that room. And the first hour of every day would be us breaking down your show from last night that we all listened to on the way home from work. And it was the king of like, I'd be in my driveway for half an hour, like listening for
Can I say something to you right now? Can I say something? Because I would have loved to have known that was happening in town. I would have loved to have known that I had comrades, people of like mind out there, but I was locked in radio land, where all it was a lot of hate mail and a lot of general managers and program directors staring at me like, this isn't going to work. And why are you doing this to us?
Well, that's the thing. It's that you created this show in an environment where it didn't belong. It's sort of like if the Colbert Report was on CNN.
Right. Yes.
This is parodying this, but you're doing it in that venue.
Environment. Yeah.
It's really the grandchild of the War of the Worlds broadcast.
Yeah.
People didn't realize that it wasn't
they didn't know what's happening. Yeah. I don't know that Orson Welles intended that. Did he intend that broadcast to fool people? Did he want it to sound as if it was?
He said he didn't, but there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. That they timed the first attack of the Martians to the other show that was on at the same time. The big competition for Mercury Radio Theater was Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, and we can go into the lunacy of a ventriloquist on the radio that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
but they timed it to their commercial break when people would flip around the dial.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So they knew that at this point more people were going to come over, so that's when they hit them. So it was clearly planned.
They hit them with the Martians. Yeah.
But as you said, this sort of grew. You were on KLSX for a while.
Yeah, I was a disc jockey, Dana, for 17 years from the time I was 20 to my late 30s, and I was all around the country. I worked at Album Rock was the big thing in those days. Album Rock Radio.
Yeah, AOR.
AOR, that's when you heard the disc jockey saying, and this weekend, the Eagles at the Tangerine Bowl with Grateful Dead, tickets $5.50. That's what we did, and we played sets of 3 big rock songs. And that was my world until I finally couldn't stand it any longer because I knew I wanted to do more. I knew I had a lot more inside of me. And then talk radio took off in the late 80s, and I jumped into that thinking, hey, this is my chance,
You say you started off as just an AOR disc jockey. It was basically you were living WKRP in Cincinnati.
Pretty much, yeah. That was my life, yeah.
And you move all around the country. Like how long, what is the average lifespan in a market of a DJ?
Oh my God. For me, for disc jockeys, there are some cats that lasted a long time. Like here in LA, KMET, we had a radio station that was #1, and Mary Turner was there for years and years and years. And but if you're just a cat like me, a guy that was a journeyman, I was 2 years and gone. So I was a WBJW. Those were the call letters. They also had a WKIS in Orlando. So you get a KISS at 740, but a BJ at 1440. That probably got somebody fired. And then I moved on from there to New Orleans, and 2 years at Album Rock in New Orleans. Then I went from there to Miami, which was fun.
Sure.
To LA. And then in LA, I was for the length of the 80s, I was in Los Angeles at K West. Some people may remember the old K West. On to KNX FM, on to Westwood One, on to KLSX, a classic rock station. And that's when my Album Rock thing ended in the late 80s.
Right.
And 2 years in a cloud of dust,
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Is the bitch on?
Oh,
Is she still there?
I'm a bitch, am I?
Oh, you certainly are. You're more than a bitch. You're a son of a bitch. That's what you are.
Well, I am
Listen, you.
media.
You have the nerve to not want the blind children to sit down. Wait, my dear. There's a God above.
They be allowed in front of the line.
What?
You heard me, you old...
No, you're the old bitch, not me.
How dare you, you old bag?
Oh,
Why
listen,
should
you.
blind children be allowed to the front of the line, yes or no?
They should be allowed. And you wait,
Why?
your day is coming. Maybe someday you'll be blind and see what it's like.
No, darling, I take very good care of myself.
Yeah, you must have a fat ass and in everybody's way. That's what you are.
I have been told I have a very pert ass.
Oh,
and very
yeah,
pert
I can
breath.
imagine. Yeah.
I've been told
You know what? You're all stuck on yourself, and I bet you look like a freak.
Exactly how old are you?
What would you give to know?
I can guess, and I think it begins with an 8.
Yeah?
What do you think of that?
Well, you're not a good guesser.
All right, it begins with a 9.
Well, what do you begin with, a 9?
No,
What do you begin with, a 9?
You begin with a 9 iron.
No.
Darling, I went to work an event. I'm not sitting collecting my pension. I went out and I worked an event.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a press pass. All right,
There's plenty of people working. Stop bragging about you. Braggadite you.
A what?
Everything is you.
Let me guess, you're Jewish. I was.
What does that have to do with anything?
I'll tell you right now. I'm working. I'm contributing to society. I'm not sitting watching reruns of Sheriff John and going up and shuffling and getting myself.
Yeah, keep putting medals on yourself.
I'm not shuffling into
You know
the
what?
kitchen for chamomile tea.
Self-praise stinks.
And I will tell you, I'm not praising myself. I work for a living. I'm not shuffling around with a tin cup.
Yeah.
And when I ask to get to the front of the line, when I ask for a good table in a restaurant, they better hop to it.
Well, it's a good
let me ask you something, Margaret.
Listen, you.
I need to ask a question.
I wasn't there because I would have taken you by the head and pushed you right to the end of the line.
I would have scratched you and slapped you.
I would have grabbed your wig off your head.
I would have taken you and pushed you.
Yeah. You just try it.
Yeah,
you just try it.
I would have slapped your rude
I would have
face.
straightened you out in 1 minute.
Let me guess. Your favorite actor is Andy Griffith.
What?
Your favorite actor is Andy Griffith.
What has Andy Griffin got to do with this?
Andy Griffin?
Well, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about the state of your life there in Anaheim, there in the small condominium that your daughter bought you, driving off to see the Sybil reruns or the Sybil taping in Hollywood.
Don't you wish you had it?
$5.
Yeah, don't you wish you had
it? And I
it?
bet you make your weekend runs to Laughlin, don't you?
I certainly do.
What's interesting is that what you learn in the documentary is that the guy that really changed the game for talk radio was Rush Limbaugh.
It was. And here's the argument that people will look at me and go, you what? You admire Rush Limbaugh? I said, I'm not talking about the guy's politics here. I'm talking about the art of what he did.
Sure. You can't deny, as Orson Welles said, proof of communication. Like he's clearly, and I hate the guy, but like,
I don't like his politics. And it was, you could say, you could do a whole 5 hours on that. But what Rush did do is he took the talk radio format and he turned it into sort of personality-driven talk. He had comedic little sketches that he did. Mm-hmm. He had this EIB network, which I thought was hysterically funny. Excellence in broadcasting. He was parodying all of these pumped-up guys.
Yeah, Do you think that he came to believe his own joke?
Yes, because had Rush continued along the lines that he was on, he could have still maintained his conservative point of view and at the same time make fun of it. And I think it would have been far more enjoyable to listen to. It would not have been as polarizing, and people would not have many people have such a horrible opinion and memory of him. Had he continued doing what I liked, which was that, he had the homeless report and he had these ridiculous, he had Mervyn Snerdley, whatever that cat's name was. And you know what I'm saying? He said, and the EIB, and he did what I fell in love with radio for. He made me see these things. Mm-hmm. He said, well, I'm walking to the EIB network. It's a disgusting edifice, Right.
Yeah. He created the world. He created
a whole world that you could see. Yeah. So I heard that. I said, aha, radio's loosening up. It's beginning to really appreciate personality driven things. And the content is important other than music. So that's when I decided I would go for broke with what my instincts were and try to find a talk radio gig as opposed to a disc jockey gig and just let loose my instincts on the air. And that's what happened,
And you ended up in Ventura, California.
Ventura,
lovely place, by the way.
Ventura, it is. California. Yeah. Ventura's trying to be the more than just the place you drive through on your way to Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's more than the place you get gas on the way to Santa Barbara.
You get on the way to Santa Barbara.
But
it's a very cool place, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. But that's where you invented your first character. That's where you invented your first guest.
That's what happened. We were on the air. It was Operation Desert Shield, which was the build-up to Desert Storm. So we had a lot of troops over there. It
was 89?
90, the summer of 90. And I came on and I decided one day just to come on as this character I created, Raj Faneen, an Egyptian businessman. My name is Raj Faneen. I'm an Egyptian businessman. But first of all, I think that you're overreacting to Saddam Hussein. He's a good man. He's got some good ideas, this kind of crap, He's got good ideas.
Yeah, that's not going to throw people in Ventura County at all.
Oh, dude. So my engineer, producer was a guy named Greg Glassman at the time, and he's looking through the glass at me, waving his arms and going, there's people calling. They want to talk to this Iraqi, So I said, put them through. And that's when that started. And it was
Did you have
fun.
a phone? Were you talking into a phone?
I was talking into a phone. And that technology never changed over the course of the show. It was a phone that I dialed to a number so I could, as you know, we had a phone bank full of all kinds of lines, called one of the lines. So the phone's going through a phone box. There's a little bit of noise there, and you've got some ambient noise. And now here I come with this Iraqi, and I sort of moved the phone away from my voice to create some sort of an ambient change and began there. Actually, Raj, though, just to backpedal here a little bit, Dana, Raj was on mic as a fill-in guest.
Okay. He wasn't a call-in.
He was not. Subsequent to that, I would have a lot of characters call in using the phone. But that day, I'm filling in for Phil Hendrie here on the KVEN.
Okay, so you didn't. So it was just one guy the first time. It was just Raj filling in.
It was Raj filling in. Then I went to the phone calls the next day because I knew I was going to do that, and I had that worked out. But I thought having him be a guest host would focus everything on him. And there was all this ire and angst about Iraq invading Kuwait and so forth,
Right.
So
and in 1990, what you then had, I'm sure, the next day is because, again, this isn't an entertainment. This is a talk radio. So I'm assuming a news talk or something. Then the management comes to you because the management is getting calls like, why are you putting a Saddam Hussein supporter on your airwaves?
Right. Well, the good news was I had a program director named Rich Galano who knew what he was hiring. He knew because my audition tape had all kinds of character voices. The first character that I did on the audition was a character I do named Dr. Jim Sadler, only his name was Dr. Howard Powell. Dr. Powell, is it Powell or Powell? It's Dr. Powell. I can't understand,
And it's so close to reality.
Yes, you have to watch.
It's so close. There was a guy on, gosh, it might have been on NPR, but he was like a restaurant reviewer and was just like, it's a family Italian restaurant. You're going to get sauce on your shirt. You're going to get sauce on your shirt. It's like, there's not, or book,
and he's dead serious.
Book bag on NPR. It's like, I used to say to my wife, like, this is a Phil Hendrie show, or this is a Phil Hendrie sketch. Why are we listening to it? Our book today is Comfort Me with Apples.
Right.
This is a Phil Hendrie sketch.
We had a guy in the air in Miami when I went to WIOD. This is after KVEN. I went from there to Atlanta, and then I went to Minneapolis. And then I got to the best station I really worked for before KFI was WIOD Miami. That was a personality-driven talk station. Everybody was doing some level of comedy.
And what year is this?
This would have been WIOD was 94 through 96.
Yeah, like mid 90s Miami. Yeah. I mean,
Miami.
Was Larry King still there?
No, Larry was gone, and
but that's where he rose to prominence. Was in
he
Miami.
did, and he had. There's a whole Larry King subtext to everything at WIOD because Neil Rogers, our midday host, used to just bedevil Larry and just make fun of him. The challenge of Miami was this: it was not a market that wanted to hear news talk. They were down there to party. They were down there.
That's Miami.
Great. Oh, it was Miami. In the 90s, Miami was fantastic. It was South Beach, and everybody was partying. So if you tried to do news talk, they would kill you. So it was perfect for my show because I was feigning in news talks and pissing people off even more, And we had the Bay Village police come to the station one night because they thought I had an escaped convict on the air that they were looking for. And the people were like, this guy, oh, yeah, they came by. And that was my relationship with the police, by the way, Dana, down through the years was one of, first of all, what are you doing? And then they loved me. I had a knock on the door in Minneapolis at CCO. The cop is there. He says, Phil, you okay? I said, I'm fine. Why? Well, you're turning into a werewolf on the air, and people were calling. Literally. So
Minneapolis is a great town.
I loved it. I had a great audience.
Yeah.
Great audience there.
Yeah, Minneapolis is really. Yeah, I know some of those radio
the warehouse
guys.
district up there, and I had a wonderful audience. I was at an old school CBS O&O though. So,
which is for people that are owned and operated
by CBS. Right. Charles Osgood would come there like once every 6 months. This is Charles Osgood. Here's a guy that did a 5-minute news thing, and he had a staff of like 60 people. I couldn't do this thing, man.
I'll tell you what, here's a Minneapolis radio story.
Were you on the air there?
No, but I mean, I've been a guest because I'd go through there as a comedian.
Cities? Yeah.
Still do. I think I'm going there in a month. But no, I was at the Aspen Comedy Festival in Aspen, Colorado in the wintertime. It's like January, February, late 90, like 97, 98.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Aspen during the winter. And the festival had these kids on the sidewalk with backpacks that were full of hot chocolate tanks.
No kidding.
Would go and they would just give you a hot chocolate because it was, it was a big festival. HBO was paying for it.
Right.
And so I'm walking around with a bunch of comedians and we stop for a
hot chocolate.
And I just go to the kid, how's it going? Having a good time? Yeah. He says, anybody been an asshole? Go, Garrison Keillor. Like right away.
Right out of his mouth, right out of the
only person. Garrison Keillor.
God, I went to Aspen a couple of years doing the show, and I remember sweating buckets because there I was doing the show live now.
Yep.
So I'm having to do the calls, do the premise, make sure I'm getting calls to buy into the premise, make sure that the premise is funny, which generally that was the least of my worries.
Right.
Do it all live in front of a bunch of TV executives.
Sure.
And thank God it worked.
Yeah.
We had a couple of good hours, so.
I mean, I don't want to like make you uncomfortable by kissing your ass too much, but
no, it's fine.
What you do, because I don't know how much of it is planned. I mean, I've actually learned a lot from you as a writer, the way you will escalate.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have a beat sheet of how it is escalating, but you are no one else in it. It's you and a phone for a long time. And your podcast is a perfect example, going back and forth, and it's not scripted. So like everyone
bullet points
knows comedy is in awe of your instrument. Because it's like Judd Apatow says in the documentary, it's like, I don't even know how that happens. And that was our attitude when we would talk about you in the writer's room. And these are very talented guys going like, yeah, I don't know how he got there. There's a couple of, I'll give you an example I'll give the listeners a great example of one that I always cite of like the perfect Phil Hendrie thing. R.C. Collins is a kid. You want to do R.C.'s voice?
That's a voice that's really hard to do now. At its peak, it was like Rocky the Squirrel. It really was. But anyway, he's and he's based upon a lot of kids I knew when I was growing up. There was always a kid on the street. Hey, Hendrie, what do you think you're going to do? Hey, why don't you bug off, okay? Yeah, you and what army? It was always some little kid who thought he was tougher than he was,
Well, yeah, in this particular instance, R.C. was in the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Because he's missing a kidney, right?
He was missing a kidney, and his wish was he was going to die. And it's the perfect premise. He was going to die, and his wish was he wanted to be served a black and tan at his corner tavern because he was underage. And people were outraged and sympathetic. You got both sides.
Yeah.
But one guy called up who was in the program and was saying like, as somebody who threw their life away to alcohol, it breaks my heart to hear you be so obsessed with this thing. And RC was just like, have you ever, I'm not even going to try to do it because, so you threw, and he like, and by the way, perfect escalation. Have you ever, so you drank a lot? Yeah. Have you ever had like Bushmills? And he goes, yeah. He's like, smooth as silk, baby.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Because what happens is the callers try to sort of manipulate the emotion. Well, when you call in and you think you're going to now control things, you just put yourself into the mix, brother. So it's like the guy that called in, excuse my language, like the guy that said, my stepdaughter, I lost her to a killer. Really? Was she a piece of ass? And I'm sorry, but they step right in. So yeah, RC took this man with an alcohol abuse problem that most everybody else would just stay away from and try to help the guy, and tried to make it worse. Yeah.
I don't even know if you remember the specifics of this. And then it escalated to what RC wanted the waitress to do. Again, it's like you
love it.
It's brilliant improv because you always build, you never deny. And then it's like, I want to go down. I want to be served a black and tan. I want the waitress to flash me the hoots, and I want to see some early morning dew.
Yeah.
And then you would come in again, interrupting yourself, like just disgusted. Early morning dew. It's just like, but like that's clearly improvised, like that, and it was just. Oh, it was just.
But it's basically working off the bullet point of the RC is dying. And because he's playing, he can have anything he wants. Who would deny a dying child? And even something disgusting. And now you start to push the attitude and the tolerance of the people listening. Well,
right. Because at one point he goes, renal failure, Phil.
Yeah.
Can you say it with me? Renal failure.
Right. Who would deny me anything that I need? You don't know what it was like growing up like me, being made fun of and stuff. So if I want to check out the early morning dew, I'm going to see it.
Yeah, just breathtaking.
Yeah.
And people, I'm sure, like it would always amaze me because again, terrestrial radio, people are flipping the channels. I mean, you have X number of people that are, getting out of work and getting their car and like, bang, 790. Were you on 640 or 790?
640.
640, right.
KFI 640, yeah.
Right.
And you have Cume, man. That's your Cume audience. That's your massive audience. And what you're doing is you're trying to get them to stay. That would be your quarter-hour audience. But
right.
Let's look at Cume. You got a big Cume. You got a whole lot of people to draw from. And really, Dana, 99% of your audience eventually knows what you're doing. They like it. They're staying with you. It's that 1% to 2% that call. And then 1/2 of that is the people that don't get it and are being suckered in by it. So most talk shows only get 2% of their audience ever calling. And in the city of Los Angeles, you'd be interested to know, because I mentioned this the other day to somebody. In the city of LA, where we got, I don't know, Metro, we got 10 million people. It's really only about 5,000 to 10,000 people that call all the talk stations back then.
Really? Yeah.
Dig that. Yeah. Only about 10,000 people call all of the damn talk shows,
Spend so much time in the car. The people that I would listen to, I don't know, where was Art Bell on 790?
Yeah, he was. He was.
Because that's why I knew. Like I remember, like Larry Elder when he was not a lunatic. And remember Michael Jackson.
I think Art Bell actually started on KFI, man. I think he started. Yeah, he did. Yeah, and I do remember Michael Jackson. A little short.
Jackson. Hello. And
I don't.
But he was great because he was what you say personality driven radio.
Yeah,
not a conservative.
No.
Which I don't know what it is about conservatism and talk radio that
demographics. Yeah, demographics, brother, because AM radio,
old white guys are listening.
Old white guys, yeah. So FM, completely the opposite,
right.
The only thing left on AM radio now are like old conservative people, and that's why you hear all these sort of firebrand shows, however many are left.
Yeah, and they have to just keep upping the ante to but there was this golden age. And Joe Frank, I think, were you ever concurrent with Joe Frank?
Joe Frank was in New York, and I must have been a kid, I think, when he was on the air. 60s mostly.
Yeah, but then Joe Frank had a big show here on NPR.
Oh, okay.
In the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, he would do these long stories that would build slowly, and he would do these. It was very NPR. It was on whatever the
KCRW here in LA.
KCRW in Santa Monica. And he would have like these rhythm loop tracks underneath the story. So it was very hypnotic, and it would draw you in. He would take big pauses. And he would tell a story of like a group of men to prove their manhood as they got older, wanted to climb Mount Everest. And the group split off. There was a fight and the group split off. And one group stopped halfway up the mountain and opened a small gift store. But it took he waited like 10 minutes, and then it was like
you hear that part.
Yeah. And it was just, and he was Sunday mornings. I had Joe Frank on Sunday mornings. I had you every day, and then I would have Art Bell at night that I was such a fan of. And you would parody Art Bell.
I did, and thankfully he liked it because it wasn't really cruel. It was just taking what he did. But Art Bell. He did everything that you quote were not supposed. Every program director in America would tell you don't do what Art Bell did, except it was successful. He started every hour with a commercial. He did 40-minute phoners, which were supposedly death anywhere else. But an Art's show, you're driving through the middle of the night listening to some guy talking about liquid beings coming out of his toaster or something.
Yeah.
It works,
It was great. Well, he never denied.
Yes.
He never denied. I remember once, and I just have this weird crystalline memory of I can see my old shower in my old house. I was doing a show or a show out of town or I was shooting something. And I came home like super late and got in the shower and I had a shower radio and I turned it on. And he said, as I turned it on, "Sir, I'm not saying that you're not the Antichrist. What I'm saying is we had the Antichrist hotline open last week and I got 16 calls."
Yeah, Art gave them dignity, whereas before people would mock all of those people. Yeah, I believe.
I'm a time traveler from Andromeda. I work at a photomat in Louisville, Kentucky. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Let's hear the story. Art Bell here, and of course he started everything with a commercial. But first, coming up, we have General Johnson Jameson, who will tell us about the human waste chili maker that he's taking to Mars with him. The hell?
That was the one. That was the one that I still do for my family. The human waste chili maker. Defecate into the funnel, season to taste, and 2 days later you have delicious chili. But also, it was one of those things where, like, when I would watch Mystery Science Theater or whatever, it's one of those few things in my life where I would sit alone in the car going, "Is this for anyone else?" But 10 million people are thinking that. Like,
I'm going to say the same thing.
Only I'm getting this.
You know what, man? I think that's why I fell in love with radio when I was 5 years old. We were driving to Toronto, Canada to visit my grandparents, and my mom had 4 kids in the car, which to this day I have to admire that they did that. They went from LA to Toronto with 4 kids and somehow kept us entertained. But during the ride, in the
LA
middle of
to
the
Toronto,
night,
that's a week. That's a week.
I remember going under the Detroit River. We entered Canada through Detroit, Windsor, and going under the Detroit River, and me scared to death that the river was going to collapse on this roadway we were in. You know?
But when we would go through the Sumner Tunnel into Logan Airport, under the tunnel, my father would say the same thing when we go into the tunnel. Well, if the tunnel collapses, it's all over.
Yeah, what is it with dads, man?
I'm 8.
They got little tiny kids in the car, and they think, "Why would we just scare the hell out of them now?"
Yeah. So you're in the car, you're going to Toronto.
In the car, but in the middle of the night as we rolled on, and it was just me and my dad awake, I would listen to these radio stations. Exactly what you just said, Dana. Who else is hearing this? This guy's talking to me. This is the coolest job that you could possibly have. He's got music. He's telling me about the city, and he's telling me about the night, and he's telling me about the weather. So, and it was that very, very singular experience. And I think that's why I fell in love with radio. That's all I ever wanted to do was radio, man.
Yeah, I love, and you did it in Art, and Art Bell did it too. It's like that he created this world. I mean, Art Bell's world did not exist. There was no sunlight in Art Bell's world. It was from the high desert. In the great American Southwest at night, and you're alone in your car at night, and the real world is not a part of this world, and it's its own universe. And if I had the discipline to just do one thing, which I don't, like that could be one of them. Like, just
that'd be a cool thing.
Create a little audio world. And what is interesting though, and you see it with the World of Phil Hendrie, your podcast, is that despite the fact that now, and you've lived through this, with digital and podcasting coming in, being in show business now in any form, whether you're a writer or television or you're on a podcast, it's like talkies and color and TV all came in at the same moment. It's like everything is up in the air. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on with anything. Yeah. And it's going to be totally different tomorrow.
Yeah. And everybody is gig. It's the gig economy. That's one of the big contributors to that.
Absolutely. But people still are go-to audio, just only audio. The theater of their mind is still a real thing.
And it's also convenient. Everybody's moving around. Yes, we'd love to be able to sit down and watch all this stuff. But, I don't know if you know, Dana, last year, a pretty impressive cast of people, actors and writers got together and began doing an episodic podcast. I don't know what became of it. I know that Odyssey was involved in producing it. Yeah. And
what was it?
I don't know, man, but they were saying, and we're open to submissions. It was real kooky. They were only open to submissions for like 2 weeks, and then they closed everything down. I asked my agent about it, and she goes, "There's no money in it.
There's no money. Well, there's no money for sure."
Yeah. Well, but the thing is that they had some pretty heavy names attached, so there was money for them for sure.
Sure. Well, they did a big audio play of James Ellroy's American Tabloid novel.
Maybe that was it, or
and yeah, that had a lot of names. But to me, and I'm an Ellroy freak. It wasn't as entertaining as just listening to James Ellroy talk,
yeah.
Which he also did. He also had because he's his own flavor of lunacy, and I say that in a positive way. I love what he does, but yeah, so it is just that one thing that the delivery system changes.
Yeah,
but the content is the same. It's like it comes down to one person's talent behind a microphone, creating a world and organizing it. And when you are the stuff that you would do that I found alarming, whose husband is is it Bobby Dooley's husband?
Bobby Dooley's husband, Steve,
right. Steve Dooley, right. Because, I thought it was Margaret Gray.
Margaret has a husband, Frank, but he's a whole other problem.
A whole other problem. But when you would you would be interviewing Bobby Dooley, and I could never comprehend how you would do this when I would hear it, where you're Phil Hendrie and you are interviewing this woman, Bobby Dooley, who's with Western States Homeowners Association, which is gated community. Yeah. And you're talking to her. And then you have a caller that would come in. And in addition to that, you have her husband talking to her off mic.
Yes.
In the phone. So you've got you have 4 voices in this segment.
3 of them I control. And
you are 3 of them.
Yes. Yeah.
But not only are you 3 of them, you're also writing what they're saying. You're not performing 3 different roles. You are writing and performing 3 different roles. You're just flying. I'm assuming that what you have to do is like a surfer. I have to abdicate control and just.
Well, you know your conditions. You know which direction the wave's going. You cannot control the ocean itself. You cannot control the wind itself, but you can, in that environment, sort of shift and control your direction. And you can also control pretty much whether you stay or fall off the board. So, but and I'm not comparing, and I've said this many times because Matt Besser, who's a wonderful man at UCB and many other places, said, Matt, and he said once, and I'm not comparing myself to Robin Williams at all, please, but he said it's the same muscle.
Yeah, no, it is. I know both of you, and I knew Mr. Williams, and I know you 100%.
There's a kind of a muscle that you work where it's an improvisational, comedic stream where you knew before you started the bit, you know where you want to go, and you know the bullet points you want to hit, and as you go, oh, here's another point, so you kind of find these places. And Bobby is just Bobby, and the characters, of course, intimately. Bobby's based on my mother. So I know what she's going to say.
Yeah. And when people would call up angry at Bobby, she would do, I will call up angry at Bobby, and you would do what Bobby would do. I'm listening to your show, and the one thing that your guest doesn't understand, if you could stop it, just let me tell you.
Well, I'm here for you. Yes, I'm listening to you.
Bobby had one where she wanted an ordinance that the fire trucks and ambulances and police cars had to lower the volume of their sirens when they went by her neighborhood because they paid more in taxes and they were entitled to more peace and quiet.
Right. Yeah.
And then it escalated to her. It scared her domestic who would crawl under the beds when they went by.
Yeah.
And then she soiled a hand-me-down Bill Blass Robin's Egg Blue pantsuit.
Well, I think the best.
If you've ever seen a Robin's Egg Blue Bill bag with a little brown stain.
Yes. and there was this noticeable streaking.
Yeah, there's a lot of streaking.
I got it, Steve. Take it easy.
I like the whole "I got it, Steve" thing. But the best Bobby Dooley was something that actually I got from my girlfriend. I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm drying my nails." You've seen it. Your wife's done it. Women, when they do their nails, they're drying their nails up here. So I got it in my mind. I didn't say to them. I said, "How do you wipe your ass?" Then this is so Bobby. Well, my nails are wet, and we have Blanca. She's a wonderful lady. Well, what? And it started off, man, like, there's a very serious civil rights action against you, Ms. Dooley. Phil, I am shocked. I can hardly breathe. I'm being sued. Well, tell us about it. I asked her my wife asked if she'd take I'll do it, Steve. If she would take some of the toilet paper, wad it up into a mitt, and just clean me back there. Because her fucking nails
but
are
again,
wet.
the specificity, wadded up into a mitt. It's like it's the beautiful specificity of it.
Because she figures, well, it's wadded into a mitt, Phil. So her hand is protected. Well, I'm telling you, brother, it was one of the best hours we did because the women are like, you got all kinds of women who are calling in about, I know how to do my fucking nails, Jack. I'd never have anybody wipe my ass for me. So it was a beautiful thing, but that was Bobby and her entitled, and she doesn't see anything wrong with it.
My first wife was an agent and then a television executive, so I had a window into the business world.
Right.
And one night, this is in the early 2000s, I was had the TV on and I was sitting at the coffee table working with my laptop, writing probably something. And one of the execs from HBO that worked with my wife came in and pointed to the TV and said, pretty soon, everything on that, and he pointed to the TV, and then he pointed to my computer, is going to come from that. And I was like, huh. And we all thought, oh, so you won't have a TV anymore. No, all it meant is everything on that screen is going to be coming from your little screen. And the delivery system changed.
Yeah.
But it still shows.
But I wonder if when he said that to you, did he know it was going to be streaming on demand? Or did he think it was still going to be the live appointment listening and appointment viewing that they had?
I can't imagine he was that prescient, but they knew, where the technology was going.
Right. Right.
They knew. And I think that, the broadcast networks, again, like you forget them, like you forget those CBS still has shows that are on Wednesdays at 9.
Yeah, well, we watched The Good Doctor, man. And in fact, last night, Jackie and I were watching The Good Doctor. It says next episode 7 doesn't drop till March 24th. What? Like we're all pissed off.
Yeah.
And she said, you're right. That's still on the air on a network. It is.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
It's funny. Yeah. Because my kids are late teens and mid to late teens. And they when they say, what are you watching? They mean they get a show and they watch it all.
Yes.
They watch, like with my kids, it was Grey's Anatomy. And then they'll watch 13 seasons of Grey's Anatomy. And then they'll watch The Gilmore Girls. And they'll watch.
It's kind of how it's done. And
that's that's what I do. I just discovered Slow Horses, which is the greatest show. And I watched 3 seasons of Slow Horses in a week.
I think that's the way.
With your fan, Gary Oldman.
Gary's in that show?
Gary is the lead in Slow Horses.
Oh, I'm going to have to watch that now, man.
It is fucking brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a British spy show, but it's like the dregs of the MI5 based on these novels by this guy, Mick Herron. And
awesome.
It's because he played Smiley in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. This is the opposite of Smiley. This is like Bluto Blutarski from Animal House in the MI5. And
just a scumbag.
Yeah. In fact, but here's the brilliance of it. Really brilliantly well constructed spy stories. That is my weakness. But he has a flatulence problem. And he'll be having a meeting with his opposite, a very serious clandestine meeting, and they'll be talking in a parking garage at 2 a.m. And suddenly the partner will just go, Jesus Christ.
What is that?
Yeah, sorry, it lingered. And then they'll just keep going.
You know, I love watching British police procedurals. It's like the British police procedural is the Western for the British TV.
Yes.
You know, we have our Westerns. They have their cop procedurals that are some of them. This stupid show that got me hooked in, speaking of watching 20 seasons worth, this Midsummer Murders thing. Now,
what's that? Midsummer Murders.
Oh, you got to check it out. John Nettles is the star. He's a detective in a fiction.
Is it on BritBox or something?
It's on Acorn. And
I don't have now. What's Acorn? I don't even know.
It's BritBox. Check out. You know what? Go to Amazon. You'll find it at Amazon Prime. But basically, it's this. It's a wealthy, super wealthy community in the Midlands of England, and he's solving murder after murder. And you're thinking, this is not real. Why? Who would want to live in a wealthy community where you're being found with a hatchet in your head in your kitchen? So that's stupid. You know. So right away, I'm hooked. You know, what the hell are they talking about here?
There are people that are addicted to streaming services that I've never even heard. It's on Flange. What?
What is the Flange? What is
it used to be Wigwam. Huh?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Outhouse. Yeah. They had 6 seasons on Outhouse. If you don't have Outhouse, check out Fugu. Fuck off. You know? What are you talking about?
Who's the gay man and the gay journalist?
That's Doug Danger.
Doug Danger,
gay man, gay journalist. Based on Gary Spivey, who's a radio astrologer guy.
I'm very good looking.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm very good looking.
Yeah. That's Chris Norton.
That's Chris Norton. Different character.
Chris Norton is. I did Chris Norton at UCB, and I'm not trying to talk about myself because I'm scared to death of doing live performing, but it brought the fucking house down. I was surprised. You know?
How are you?
You know,
I'll let that one go. I'm scared to death of live performing. Okay.
Well, I know that I should go out and do it, especially on the heels of this documentary. I think people will want to see these characters live. But yeah, Chris Norton was just talking about, you know, I'm very good looking and I have a new movie out. It's called Daffy Dick, which this guy's dick just goes wherever it wants. And the audience was just
Daffy Dick.
Daffy Dick, you know. And then he went into Ghost Penis, which brought the house down. He says, Daffy Dick dies of a stroke. Okay, yeah. And anyway, it turns after Daffy Dick dies, it turns into Ghost Penis. And Ghost Penis just floats through the air. Well, I'm telling you, man, I was so happy that people dug that. It was James Adamian had a thing for Armenia over. A bunch of comics were there. So I left that. I left the theater that night thinking, wow, maybe I can do this on a semi-regular basis, doing these characters. But
were you introduced as Chris Norton?
Yes, yeah. That's James did the usual thing. Phil Hendrie can't be here tonight. Sure.
Oh, great. The doc has a great arc where it covers your career, and then, you know, you have to survive the destruction of radio, which is where you've made your living. I mean, it is like you're a silent movie star and the talkies come in, and you've got to find a way to continue doing what you do.
I know.
And adapting it to a podcast format. You made a big change, but you actually found it, and I can hear it when I listen, very freeing.
Yeah.
By removing the collar. So talk about the birth of the World of Phil Hendrie and your decision to get rid of collars.
Yeah. And, you know, I've always believed that you're not, you know, like David Bowie said, you have to be in that part of the pool where your feet are just barely touching the bottom, meaning you need to be challenging yourself all the time. And doing this podcast has been so unchallenging. You know, I can create on the fly all of these characters and these settings, and I actually laugh my ass off while I'm doing it. And I listen, and I know Henry, and I mentioned this. Henry Rollins in the doc says, you know what? I think his show today is funnier than the old one. Now, whether that's objectively true or not, I kind of agree with him from a subjective point, because I have a lot more fun doing this one because I don't have a gun to my head saying you better paint a masterpiece today. If you don't. You know? So doing the show now, I can do it any way I want to do it. I can do it in studio, pretend like I have phone callers. I can be out on remote. I can create new characters if I want. And yeah, it makes you really happy, and it makes going to work a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Whether or not I'm challenging myself, this is the part that I need to do. That's why I'm talking to you about doing live shows, because I think that's the part of my life that needs to be challenged. Really, I don't know how much more I can do audio wise or in that sphere. So I go out, I do acting gigs, I do voiceover, and I think I need to do live, because that is the part of the pool where my feet are going to be barely touching, and you know, you keep challenging yourself. So
I understand the need to constantly challenge yourself. And Bowie's actually a good analogy of somebody that was very creatively restless.
Always.
Yeah. And you don't want to, but there's also something to be said about enjoying yourself.
Yes. You got to be happy, man. Yeah. You don't want to every day, it's not like walking to the gallows every day, or waiting to put your head to guillotine.
Do you think like your time at KFI, you were very happy then?
Very much.
Yeah. And so it wasn't like I did my best work when I was miserable.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, man.
If that's the way it's going to be, I say, well, fuck your best work.
Fuck that. Yeah. I don't, are there people like, I guess there are artists like that.
Oh, sure.
And you can't succeed unless you're in hell. And, no, I'm happy, man. And I do my best work when I'm happy. You're probably the same way. Who wants to walk into the studio, man? I mean, having just had an argument with your wife or having just been in an automobile accident or something. So,
yeah, well, there's also the belief of like, well, if you get into therapy or if you take antidepressants, it will affect your creativity. And by the time I did both, I was like, that's fine. That's fine. My creativity can suffer. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. But you know what? I bet you after you did all that shit, activity was fine. Yeah, you were rock and roll. So
you still have access to those colors. You just add several more to your palette because you're functional and you can access these things. Yeah. You don't forget you never forget what being miserable is like. You just don't like, that's like I have black and gray and white. Right. Those are but then you can also have orange and red and green. There are other colors that you can access.
Right. There's a time in your life when you'd make fun of the guys that used the orange colors because you were doing black and white and that's just the way it is. Now all of a sudden you're happy and you're going, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot you guys are doing that. That sounds like a pretty good thing, And I find that when I'm happy, I'm more courageous. I'll go ahead and go for it. I'll go ahead and take that leap,
Sure.
I when I'm unhappy, and wouldn't call it courage, I would call it suicidal.
Sure. I understand. I understand.
But yeah, so
I watch old stand-up of mine and I just go, ugh. Like when I know I was not a happy person. Like I'm talking very old, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I'll look at myself as a young man when I was not particularly functional. And I can't even watch it. Like it's not only not funny, it's not enjoyable to look at.
Somebody said, do you watch yourself? And I go, no, because I already know whether I did a good job or not. I know whether I was having a good time in the middle of that scene or in the middle of this or that. Do I have to go back and listen? I go back and listen to enjoy it again, to laugh again.
Yeah.
Because I remember how much fun I had doing that.
And that's a great thing. Yeah. That you can if you can crack yourself up.
Oh my God. It's the best.
Yeah. That's a great thing. By and large, are your heroes writers, comedic actors, or broadcasters?
They're probably more comedic actors. My very first hero, this is going to sound really weird for a little kid. Well, maybe a kid in the 60s. That's who I was.
Ron Jeremy.
Yes. And for a kid in the 60s, that's weird because
he wasn't famous
then. But I knew about him. I saw some of his early work. No, I was Jackie Gleason.
Oh, sure.
The Honeymoon was the funniest goddamn thing I ever saw. And then there were Laurel and Hardy. Mm-hmm. I would die watching those guys. And then I discovered Lenny Bruce. Now today, your generation, you're a little bit younger than me, Dana. I talk to a lot of cats about Lenny Bruce, a lot of comics, and they go, yeah, I've heard of him, but I don't really understand the relevance.
I don't, I'm no ton. I was, because I'm old enough that, and I've always been somebody that appreciated stuff that came, actually, I appreciate the stuff that came before I was here. I'm much more interested in that than the stuff that's contemporary.
Now, the thing about Lenny Bruce that was, it had a big impact on me is he did act outs on stage. He went in and out of character. He went in and out of voices. He didn't just get up and stand and tell jokes. He says, how Hitler was discovered. You know the bit.
Yes.
We take him out of Bremerhaven and he does the voices of the two agents and he does the voice of Hitler himself. And I went, wow, that's funny.
And he was, the thing that he did that made him famous is not the thing that he is known for now. That sort of preachy stuff that, I mean, people remember the wrong thing about him.
Yeah. They remember they're talking dirty. And
and it's like, all that's true and all that's great and all that's important, but nobody would have known who he was if he wasn't just hilariously funny.
Right on
American, I'm Not a Nut, Elect Me, and all of these early albums where he was just, and I tell, comedians like today, like what the comedian at the Palladium playing the London Palladium. Why don't you do an 11-minute bit that's a narrative with a beginning and a middle and an end?
Yeah, man.
It's like, why don't you try that?
Yeah, try that. And he had fun doing it, and it seemed like that's how
doing it, and that stuff had stuff that's still funny. It's not anything you're going to hear on the law, language, and Lenny Bruce.
No.
But he had bits about. Remember the bit he used to do about? There's a Chinese restaurant in my neighborhood in the village. I go there with my wife all the time, and they always like, "Oh, Mr. Bruce, you're so lucky. Your wife's such a good girl. You're such a lucky man. She's a great girl. Where is your wife? We're divorced. You better off."
Know that joke. Yeah, I know that joke.
Like,
Another one he did.
That's funny today. That's funny.
Few people hear this. He said, I was very hungry and I'd smoked some weed. And I went and I got I wanted raspberry Jello. And so I get the raspberry Jello. I said, it's really good. I'll take another one. And I had 3 raspberry Jellos. I suddenly realized they better leave here and go somewhere else because it's starting to look weird. And basically the joke is I was driven all the way across Manhattan by hunger and paranoia eating raspberry Jello after smoking a joint. This guy... to me, it was hysterically funny. And those were the stories he would tell,
Oh, yeah. Did you ever have any dealings with Carlin? Speaking of people that knew Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, man.
Because you guys seem like similar.
Yeah.
So similar
George Carlin was a sweet man who.
Yes, he was. He was as nice a guy as he was funny.
Yeah. And he expressed, I don't know how I heard that he'd listened to my show and he liked it. When I went to Vegas with my wife and I rolled the dice and I called I think he left his number. I called him. I said,
he'll call you back. He'll call you back.
I would love it if we want to come see you. I do not want free tickets. I just want to make sure that we have a couple of seats up close to see you tonight at Bally's. He called me back. He goes, Phil, I got 2 tickets for you at the box office. Just get them, go do, Oh my God, we were ringside right in front of the stage. I went backstage. I met him. We had a phone conversation. And to this day, I feel bad about this phone conversation. So, sometimes I'd like to do a voice on your show. And I said instinctively, as I do to everybody, I kind of work alone. I shouldn't have said that. I should have said, of course, Mr. Anytime you want to come on.
I understand that.
What was I thinking? I don't know what I was thinking.
No, but he said that to people too. Don't worry about it because he said that as often as he said it to you.
Yeah.
I have a joke for you. I don't want it.
I know. But no nicer man. And the best part is at the end of the end of his set in Vegas, he said, "Okay, here are the people coming backstage. Billy Johnson, what's it? That crazy motherfucker, Phil Hendrie, come on back."
Great.
So today, I think consider that to be like almost I was knighted.
Yeah.
And we went back and talked to him. But George Carlin is a guy that went from straight comic to Gonzo. I don't know when he made the change, but that was
late 69, 70.
Yeah, just said.
Yeah, it's great. Well, so people who are either new to the world of Phil Hendrie or are old fans, the documentary is called Hendrie. Where can that be seen?
It's on Amazon right now. It's also on Sling, and it's on good Apple TV. DirecTV has a streaming download. I think you can use iVerse. There was a whole list of things that Pat said.
I have them.
Yeah. We watched it on Prime Video,
and
exactly.
And the World of Phil Hendrie is your podcast.
PhilHendrieShow.com. That's where all of our stuff is archived. Our old radio show stuff is there, as well as the new digital stuff.
Oh, the new is at PhilHendrie.com.
Phil Hendrie Show, PhilHendrieShow.com.
PhilHendrieShow.com, and the podcast is called
Some guy bought
The
Phil
World of
Hendrie.
Phil Hendrie. You're kidding me.
Oh, they do that. They buy your, do you want to buy your name back? No.
No, yeah, go fuck yourself. No, enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, that's where we are every day, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
and the podcast is called The World of Phil Hendrie.
Yeah, The World of Phil Hendrie, Phil Hendrie Show, and we're also on Podcast One, which is our wonderful marketing sales platform, and other places around town. Yeah.
Do you do your podcast from your home or do you go someplace?
No, I do it from a studio we have at the house. Actually, I have a studio separate from the house, but within a block, and do it there, man, and upload it, and boom, I live way the fuck away from. I live 40 miles outside of LA, man. Every time I go into town, it's like a big
north, south, east, or west.
I live up the coast. I live up the coast near Channel Islands Beach. Up
great.
And every time I have to go to town, I give myself 2 hours to make it into town,
Mm-hmm.
You never know. So then I have to, like a gig at 7:30 in the morning, and I'm there at, like I did an episode of Grace and Frankie, which I was terribly excited to do.
Sure. Lily
And my
Tomlin
call time was 6:30. I didn't want to be late. I think I got there at 5 a.m. There were guys there that they hadn't knocked off the overnight shift.
Yeah. You're showing up
I'm here for the episode. My call time, well, there's nobody here, man.
Yeah.
I think I went to my car and slept, for about a half an hour.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's when you're really doing the thing you want to do. Like, well, I've arrived, and you're in a trailer.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's like in makeup. You and also a clown in a trailer in makeup.
In makeup, yeah.
The documentary is called Hendrie. The podcast is called The World of Phil Hendrie. The website is philhendrieshow.com.
Yeah.
HENDRIE. This has been great.
Thank you, brother.
I'm going to pester you on the internet with some other stuff, but it's so great to catch up with you. I'm such a fan, and am so in awe of your toolbox. It's really impressive. Phil Hendrie.
Oh, it's good talking with you, man. Good to see you again. Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
He was a man of quintessential American contradictions. A man of artistic aspirations with his eye firmly on the bottom line. A man born in Detroit, Michigan, who ended up in Beverly Hills. A friendly, affable, easygoing fellow with a ruthless, cold-hearted business sense. Roger Corman was all of these and so much more. Roger Corman graduated high school in 1943, and although it was the height of World War II, he was still only 17 and too young for military service. So instead, he attended Stanford to pursue a degree in engineering. However, he turned 18 just in time for D-Day, and with the invasion of Europe on, he decided to enlist in the Navy's officer training program. But, true to his contradictory nature, once he joined the Navy, he was sent to Boulder, Colorado, where there is no ocean. World War II ended in 1945, and Corman was discharged the following year, where he returned to Stanford and graduated in 1947. So now he's 21 years old. He's a World War II veteran with a degree in engineering. Corman was sitting pretty and could work pretty much wherever he wanted. So he got a job at U.S. Electrical Motors as an engineer. That was on a Monday. By Wednesday, he realized that actually, he didn't want to be an engineer. He wanted to make movies. So he quit on Thursday morning and soon took a job as a messenger boy at 20th Century Fox, where he spent his days pedaling around the lot on a bike. According to the book, Roger Corman, Blood-Sucking Vampires, Flesh-Eating Cockroaches, and Driller Killers by Beverly Gray, one of the two main sources for this piece, the other being Corman's own autobiography, How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime. Corman soon moved up from messenger boy at Fox to working in the story department. Now, this is a job that still goes on where you're paid to read scripts, write a short synopsis, and recommend to the executives whether or not these scripts would make a good movie. That way they don't have to read every submission that comes in over the transom. Now, Beverly Gray writes that Corman pulled a script out of Fox's rejection pile, suggested some changes to the story, and sent it off to one of the execs. That script became the movie The Gunfighter, starring Gregory Peck. It was a critical and financial hit. The executive that Corman recommended the script to got a big bonus, and Corman got nothing. So he quit. He put his GI Bill to use and enrolled at Oxford. He spent a year in England before returning to America, where he once again settled in Los Angeles and began casting about for a rewarding career in show business. He ended up working on a low-budget outlaw-on-the-run movie which came to be called Highway Dragnet, no relation to the show. Highway Dragnet wasn't very good, and Corman decided that whatever movie he made next, he was going to have to direct it. Well, that movie came to be called Monster from the Ocean Floor. It was shot on a $12,000 budget in 6 days. It made money and eventually brought Corman into the orbit of two dudes named James Nicholson and Samuel Z. Arkoff, who were starting a film company, American International Pictures, or AIP. Corman and AIP were a match made in heaven, and it was here that Corman made such cult classics as It Conquered the World, The Beast with a Million Eyes, The Day the World Ended. Now, none of these movies are towering examples of the cinematic art. They are all painfully low budget and shot on the quick. So quick, in fact, that in 1955 and 1956, Corman had time to make 7 movies for AIP. And that doesn't take into consideration the films he shot for other companies, like Allied Artists. But Corman didn't care about these films. He did grow as a director, but he cared as much, if not more, about making money. And therein lies Roger Corman's internal contradiction. As Corman's frequent collaborator Charles Griffith said, Roger Corman was a divided soul, with his engineer's brain constantly torturing his artistic impulses. Actor Dick Miller, who starred in several of Corman's films, including one of my favorites, A Bucket of Blood, said, Roger was turning out a product that made him money, but at the same time, I used to get an inkling from him, from some of our discussions, that he was very sincere and very serious about his work. Now, it's hard to say he was artistic on a movie made for $17,000, but I think he was sincerely trying to make a good movie. Now, one way Corman managed to shoot for so little money was by stretching manpower. On Beast from the Haunted Cave, Paul Rapp served as assistant director, prop man, head of wardrobe, and the stunt coordinator. Oh, and he's also in the movie. And oh, yeah, he did all that for just the one salary. In 1959, Corman expanded out into the world of horror comedy. With the aforementioned A Bucket of Blood, Dick Miller plays a somewhat dim-witted busboy at a beatnik cafe. When he accidentally kills his landlady's cat, he panics and covers its body in clay so she'll think the cat has just run off. And he's, working on a sculpture of a cat. But that sculpture is seen, and Miller becomes hailed as a brilliant artist. Now pressured to keep coming up with new pieces, he becomes a serial killer. It's a great story, and A Bucket of Blood did well, but it was the follow-up film that remains one of Corman's most notable titles. The Bucket of Blood sets were still standing in Hollywood when Corman learned he could still get 2 more days' use out of them before they were struck. He relied once again on screenwriter Charles Griffiths, who immediately cranked out a similarly dark comic story about a lonely sad sack who works at a flower shop, who breeds a plant that feeds on human blood. Sound familiar? Corman shot 2 days of interiors, and screenwriter Griffiths, with the help from Corman associate Mel Wells, shot 2 additional nights of exteriors down on LA's Skid Row and at the nearby Southern Pacific Railway. They used actual hobos, living hobos, for extras and paid them in booze. The film starred Jonathan Hayes, Dick Miller, of course, and a very young Jack Nicholson, not James Nicholson, the head of AIP. Jack Nicholson, the actor, who was Jack Nicholson the Nobody at this point. Anyway, Jack Nicholson the Nobody, at that point, stars as a sadomasochistic dental patient in what came to be known as The Little Shop of Horrors. It was shot in 2 days and 2 nights. It was released in 1960 as the second feature on a double bill headed by Mario Bava's brilliant Black Sunday, with both films becoming huge hits. Little Shop of Horrors got a second burst of fame in the early 80s when it was rebooted as an off-Broadway musical, which also became a huge hit, which led to a movie version of the off-Broadway musical based on the movie. Now, the movie version of the musical adaptation of the movie had a lavish budget, leisurely schedule, and a star-studded cast. Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, Steve Martin, Bill Murray. But unlike the original, it did not make its money back. Shows to Goya. James Nicholson, not Jack Nicholson, James Nicholson, and Samuel Arkoff of AIP had an idea. What if we didn't make movies on the cheap? At least, not so much on the cheap. What if, we took a little time, spent a little money, they set aside $250,000 and a luxurious 15-day shooting schedule, and they got a lot for their money. They got a star, they got a top-notch screenwriter, they shot in color, and the resulting film kicked off an entire genre for AIP. The Roger Corman directed, Vincent Price starring, Richard Matheson written adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. Which is not to say that it was always smooth sailing. Poe's works were in the public domain by then, which fit AIP's budget just fine. But House of Usher, like most of Poe's work, is a psychological horror story. And Sam Arkoff was nervous about making a horror movie without a monster. So Corman had an answer ready to go. The house is the monster. Corman, whose move into psychological horror films coincided with his move into psychological analysis, took a Freudian approach to Usher, believing that the house came to symbolize a child's fear of the unknown. The Pit and the Pendulum, that Corman made for AIP the following year, with the same team of Price, Matheson, and Poe, took the Freudian concept even further. To paraphrase a passage from Barbara Gray's book, for Corman, the mystery of the closed door, which was to be a prominent feature of his horror films of this period, resides in the basically edible question of, what is father doing to mother? It could be murder, because it sounds pretty violent. The bed springs are bouncing around, the child hears cries, and that's pretty frightening, because his parents represent the only security he has in the world. Between 1960 and 1964, Roger Corman would make 7 Edgar Allan Poe-inspired horror films: The House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, Premature Burial, Tales of Terror, The Raven, The Haunted Palace, Mask of the Red Death, which is great, The Tomb of Ligeia, in which Vincent Price plays a role intended for Richard Chamberlain, so he's wearing what is basically a Richard Chamberlain wig. In January of 1966, he would spot a photo in Life magazine that would catch his eye. This one photograph would lead to a 1-2 punch of counterculture movies that would pave the way for the new Hollywood revolution of the early 1970s. It would introduce a new business model that would uproot the studio hierarchy and introduce a new generation of Hollywood stars, movers, and shakers who either came directly from working under Roger Corman, or if not, were rarely more than 1 or 2 people removed. The photo was of a group of Hell's Angels on their choppers riding off to the funeral of one of their members. Corman took a treatment to AIP called The Fallen Angels. Now, there had been other biker movies, of course, most famously Marlon Brando's 1954 The Wild One, that told the story of a small town terrorized by a group of bikers. But that story was told from the point of view of the terrified townspeople. Corman wanted to tell the story of the bikers. To do research, he and his screenwriter Chuck Griffith gained access to the Venice, California chapter of the Hells Angels, and they hung out with them for several days. Part of the deal was that Corman would hire them to be extras in the film and pay them for their appearances. They would pay them a separate fee for their bikes and another separate fee for their girlfriends. In his autobiography, How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime, Corman points out that the Hells Angels charged him more for the use of their bikes than their girlfriends. The film ended up being called The Wild Angels and starred Peter Fonda, Bruce Dern, and Nancy Sinatra. It was shot in Venice Beach, the nearby desert, and the mountains near Big Bear. The Hells Angels bikes were old, and they constantly broke down. The Hells Angels themselves weren't the most disciplined of performers and would often wander off in the middle of the day, regardless of whether or not they were still needed for shots. It also led to a real-life scene that was more surrealistic than anything Corman had previously put on film. Now, this is read straight from Roger's autobiography. The first day we shot out in the desert at Mecca. The setup was taking way too long, and I was really mad. Suddenly, a group of World War II armored Nazi half-track tanks rolled down the street and started attacking the swastika-bearing Hells Angels who were in the center of town. They were spraying blanks all over the place. I had no idea what was going on, and neither did the Hells Angels. But I yelled to my AD, photograph it, and I'll use it somehow. I'll use it for something. Well, as it turns out, my brother Gene Corman was producing the movie Tobruk with Rock Hudson, a little deeper south in the desert. Actually, it was supposed to be North Africa, but it was down towards the Salton Sea. And he thought this attack would be amusing. And that set the tone. The Wild Angels was released in the summer of 1966 and eventually became the biggest hit AIP had ever had up to that point. Corman decided to make the focus of his next film much farther out, while at the same time pointing his camera inward. He wanted to move from the counterculture figures of the Hells Angels to the counterculture ritual of dropping acid. He wanted to make a movie about an LSD trip. For the script, called The Trip, he needed somebody who had taken acid, of course, but who could also write. He turned to his friend Jack Nicholson, the actor who had worked for him in Little Shop of Horrors and who also starred in The Terror with Boris Karloff. But Jack Nicholson was by no means a star at this point. But lucky for him, he could write, and he had taken acid. So Corman decided to hire him to write a movie about taking acid. Peter Fonda and Bruce Dern of the Wild Angels both returned, Fonda playing a burned-out TV director who's getting divorced and decides to go on his first LSD trip, and Bruce Dern playing his friend who guides him through that trip. But Fonda had a problem. He didn't want to make a movie about a guy on an acid trip if it was going to be directed by a guy who had never taken one. So Roger Corman, who was a pretty straight-laced conservative dude, decided, for the sake of his movie, to drop acid. He was advised to take it in an environment where he felt safe and serene, so he traveled to Big Sur. Again, I am now reading straight from his autobiography. I took my acid in a sugar cube, and for a while, nothing happened. I thought, boy, what a waste. 400 miles up here for nothing. Well, I'll wait a little while longer, go out, get some wine, have some dinner, and go home to LA tomorrow. I decided to lie down, and then the acid kicked in. I spent the next 7 hours face down in the ground, beneath a tree, not moving, absorbed in the most wonderful trip imaginable. Among other things, I was sure I had invented an utterly new art form. This new art form was the very act of thinking and creating, and you didn't need books or film or music to communicate it. Anyone who wanted to experience it would simply lie face down on the ground, anyway in the world at that moment, and then the work of art would be transmitted directly through the earth from the mind of its creator into the mind of the audience. Now, to this day, I'd like to think it could work, and it would be wonderful. Just think of all the costs you could cut in production and distribution alone. As far as a movie about an LSD trip is concerned, The Trip tells a pretty straightforward story. Peter Fonda's character, Paul Grove, is getting divorced. He feels like he's sold out creatively. He connects with his friend John, played by Dern, who takes him down to the Sunset Strip to meet an acid guru named Max, played by Dennis Hopper. The beginning of Paul's trip is blissful and peaceful, but then he regresses to the Middle Ages, where he's chased by knights, after which he literally escapes John's house and flees to the Sunset Strip. It's all very psychedelic, far out and groovy, and if you want to see what the Sunset Strip looked like at that point, The Trip is a good way to see it, because basically they shot without a permit. They just put Peter Fonda in a wheelchair for a smooth shot, had him hold a camera, and pushed him around. By the following morning, Paul has come down from his trip and he's prepared to start his new life. Corman shot the film so there would be no moral judgment. You could think it was a good idea or a bad idea. and he was pretty PO'd with how AIP cut and presented the movie. They added a warning that the film was a shocking commentary about the mind-bending chemicals that were destroying people's lives. AIP took the final shot of the film and cut a jagged line across Peter Fonda's face to imply that acid had irrevocably fucked up his life. And Corman didn't like it. Despite this, the film turned out to be another hit, if not the box office bonanza that The Wild Angels was. But together, both films, The Wild Angels and The Trip, brought Jack Nicholson, Peter Fonda, and Dennis Hopper together. And they hatched an idea for a film combining the counterculture rebelliousness of bikers with the acid-soaked hallucinations of The Trip. And that film, which would come to be called Easy Rider, would rip Hollywood apart.
Just what is it that you want to do?
Well, we want to be free. We want to be free to do what we want to do. We want to be free to ride. And we want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded. And we want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, when, baby? Let's go.
We're going to have a good time. We're going to have a party.
And now, on with the show.
My guest today is a television and comedy legend. He has a new book out called Still Laughing. I'm not even going to pretend to do a fake pompous introduction because he was one of the architects of how sketch comedy is presented on television. You know, if you're a fan of Mr. Show, you have to go back to Python and SNL, and SNL and Python go back to what this man created. His name is George Schlatter. The show he created, among many other shows, is Laugh-In, which really set up how we present a form of sketch comedy on television. One of the people that really perfected how variety shows were on TV back in the 50s to the 90s, to the turn of the century. The book is called Still Laughing. He has met everyone to the best of my knowledge. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
I'm glad to be here. I didn't invent variety television. I just changed it.
You did, and you certainly, I think, perfected the format of it.
Yes. Well, we introduced technology that didn't exist. Because before Laugh-In, I did like the Dinah Shore Show and the Judy Garland Show and Stephen Edie. And those shows were pretty much song, talk, sit on two stools, do another song, like that. And then we came in with Laugh-In, which blew all of the traditional forms of variety away. And we came in with new things, new people, new devices. And that was a major contribution. Yeah. And, you know, I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast will cite Mr. Show as one of their sketch comedy shows. Mr. Show is definitely a son or a child of Laugh-In, and in the way that Laugh-In, and you put this in the book and it never entered my mind, Laugh-In really descended from Ernie Kovacs. Well, Ernie had an enormous effect on me because my wife, Jolene, we were at a party and Ernie met Jolene and absolutely thought she was wonderful. So he invited her to come in and just be the girl with him. And she never knew what she was going to do or when she was going to come home. And they just had such a wonderful time, like two children. But Ernie had an effect on me because of his love of visual and sound effects. Yeah. And he was crazy. He was an event, Ernie. He certainly was. And he knew that television was a visual medium. And what he did and what Laugh-In really perfected was that you removed the segues. You just, here's the joke. And then when the joke is over, get out of it and go to something else. That's right. Or maybe even before the joke is over. It was, it kind of captured our shrinking attention span, and the audience was ready for something that was unusual. The audience was way ahead of television, and we just captured their impatience and their love of. And we also visually, Ernie had a big effect on me with visualization. But I'm looking at television now, and I'm saying, hey, what's next? Because next is what we did. Now I want to see something that somebody else is going to do.
That's true. And in a way it's cyclical, that it kind of goes, and then you go from anarchy to order to anarchy and back. But variety in and of itself has fallen off of television. So it will be interesting to see the new format that it takes. Now, I think the most common variety show is like the stand-up special, but that's not a variety. It's one thing for an hour.
And it's not new. We had Bob Hope and Jackie Gleason, we need a new form, and it's coming because of our developing impatience with what we now have. The audience will demand something new and fresh and different and unusual. And it's coming.
And however the delivery system changes, people's wants remain the same. You get television now to order where and when you want it, but you still want to watch the same thing. It's just brought to you in a different way.
Well, when I did the Dinah Shore Chevy show, the commercials for Chevrolet were all 2 minutes. We did 3 2-minute commercials. And then when we got into Laugh-In, that began to shrink. And now your commercials are maybe 10 seconds because our attention span has shrunk, and our impatience has improved. And so we're ready. We're right on the verge of something exploding and new in television.
Yeah.
And partially because there's more to laugh at now. Come on, you want to be fun? You want to be funnier than Donald Trump? Please give me the window between tragedy and time is certainly shrinking in terms of what defines. I want to go way. I want to get back to Laugh-In and move forward, but I want to backtrack because there's something that your book made really clear to me. I was reading your book, and I've also been listening to this podcast called The History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs. And it starts way before rock and roll. It starts with the end of the big band era and Louis Jordan, and the way that Louis Jordan was really the person that sowed the seeds for what we think of as rock and roll. And it's all about the business and record labels. And what your book and that podcast has really made obvious to me is that organized crime played a huge part in what we think of as show business. Sure. in the previous era. And I was very surprised to know that you worked with Mickey Cohen. That's what I heard. My wife wanted all of that left out of the book. When I sat down to write a book, I decided I was going to write just about that because it is fairly well known that I did know a lot of those people.
Well, I don't think you could be in show business prior to 1970 and not know people in organized crime.
Well, yeah, but knowing them were different things, And but I was working at Ciro's, which was a nightclub on the Sunset Strip.
Now the Comedy Store.
Yeah. And they said I had been a bouncer at Ciro's. I was a greeter, but Jolene didn't want to read that I'd been a bouncer. So I released a story that I had been an executive in charge of emergency departures. But in that position, I did get to know a lot of people. And then I also worked at the Frontier in Vegas. So I got to know a lot of people. And they were Las Vegas. They were what was built Las Vegas. And
yes.
So I got to know them. And when I wanted to marry Jolene, she said she wouldn't marry me because I'd be dead before I was 30 with the people I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can get rid of them. She said, you're never going to get rid of those people. I said, trust me, I'll get it. Anyway, I did. A lot of them wound up at the lake, but
We're only finding them now with the drought.
Yeah, some of the people float up, right? And you say, no, not Guido, but I was fortunate because of my relationship with Jolene and her relationship with Ernie Kovacs. I came out clean, and you can't even read anything about me, which is just that's when I decided to write the book. The book is just about my funny recollections.
Yeah, it zooms along, and it's again, it's called Still Laughing. It's so great, and anybody who listens to this podcast, because we talk a lot about show business and show business history, and it's like a charcuterie tray of stories. You say something really interesting in the book about organized crime, that it was the only thing worse than when you owed them money was when they owed you a favor.
That was true. And I was able to do a lot of favors for a lot of people. And they said, I got a call one day that said, Guido wants a meeting with you. I said, oh, God, what? Yeah, we're very grateful to you for what you've done. And I said, that's fine. I'm glad. We want to do something for you. And I said, no. You don't have to do anything for me. They said, no, be serious. And when they said, be serious, you better be safe. So I said, everything I did, I'm glad I could help. And that's it. They said, okay, we want to do something for you. So, okay. So I said, okay, who don't you like? Well, when this guy with a lump under his coat asked you who you don't like, you knew the next question was going to be, where to point to him.
Yeah.
I said, I like everybody, and you don't know me anything. They said, okay. And they went like this. And I said, with two fingers. And I said, what's that? They said, that means we owe you 2 hits. It was a different world then, and it wasn't the way you read about it in the gangster movies in the Greenfield Jungle, because it was not about one guy. It was all of these guys spread that kind of influence around, and each hotel came from a different city. But I had a lot of time in Vegas, but it wasn't just Vegas. I was working in nightclubs and with Dinah Shore and Judy Garland and Lena Horne and Goldie and Liza, all of those people. So it wasn't all Vegas, and it wasn't all that, but there was a major impact we had when we came up with the idea of the recognizing the shrinking attention span that which I'm not an example of here, but
well,
we said America had shrunk. Commercials, instead of 2 minutes, we're now down to 15, 20 seconds, and so we were able to conceive and consume and retain more information faster. And that's what was the reason for Laughing exploding the way it did.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was the right show at the right time.
That's right.
For the right people.
And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because they looked at it when I ran the show for them. They said, "This isn't a television. This is crazy." I said, "Right." And they said, "Well, the audience won't understand." I said, "The audience is brighter than you are." So I said, I took it to a school, and I said, I ran it for kids in like the 6th grade. And I said, they understand it, and better than you do. They're brighter than you are, because they'd grown up with this shrinking attention span. And that was the reason for Laughing kind of exploding, because we were hungry.
You had this. It was 1967. It was the counterculture. It was, the old school of entertainment that you worked that you were eyeball deep in, with Stephen Eady and Dinah Shore and Judy Garland, and you invented the lounge act in Vegas. You were the what the counterculture would refer to at the time as the establishment, and then you create this show that speaks to the counterculture and flower power, but then it's hosted by Dan Rowan and Dick Martin as a very safe, traditional, square kind of way to introduce these people into American living rooms that wasn't threatening to people.
Well, a lot of Laughing and a lot of my reason for being here was accident. And when we took the show to NBC, they said, we can't air this. This is crazy. You have to have a host. We took it to Jim Ellers at Timex, and they said, but it's not designed for a host. They said, it must have a host. And I went to Rowan and Martin, who were working in Vegas, who were a stand-up nightclub act. And they were pretty straight and a little older than the rest of the cast. So we had them do the opening and the closing and a couple of introductions, because the show in its original concept had no host. But adding them helped it, because that was like putting one foot on the floor. And they worked it, and it was great. And but they never really understood it or really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing about it. And you say something so brilliant where you say, remember, they're stars, they're not geniuses.
This is true. And we must not only seek, we must treasure accidents. And they were a bit of an accident, because Dick was kind of, apparently kind of semi-brain dead, and Dan was very, very classy and dressed up and used long words. So they added an element of sanity into this maze of insanity, and it worked. And I was grateful to them. They didn't enjoy it. They didn't like it that much, but they were part of it.
Yes. And I said, I was 3 years old in 1967.
Oh, geez. Will you stop? Wait
but when I was in kindergarten, I went to kindergarten with a laugh-in lunchbox.
Yes.
I had a laugh-in lunchbox.
Yes, there you go.
Monday night. I remember we watched Monday nights.
That's right. And
Monday
it was
nights
tough
on
to
music.
get the show. It was tough to get the show on the air, because we were talking about subjects that were not normally talked about on television, and showing people and wearing clothes that they weren't usually wearing. And we had these unbelievably talented people that were not in the mainstream of comedy or of television. Goldie was a dancer, and I brought her in for a meeting. She said, "Why do you want to meet with me? I don't do comedy. I'm a dancer." And I said, "Well, read this introduction." And she read the introduction, which was so screwed up, you can't believe it. Everybody crashed. She said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll do it again." I said, "No, Goldie, that'll be just fine." And from then on, we never let her rehearse. So Goldie was her own separate area of magic, as was Ruth and Joanne, and of course then
Goldie
Lily.
Hawn. Yeah, Goldie Hawn, Lily Tomlin, Artie Johnson, Henry Gibbs, a generation of comedy stars all started on.
Lily came in with 11 new people. All of those weren't characters. They were people she actually created. Lily's a genius, but we were lucky to find them. And because of the fact that NBC didn't have anything to put on the air opposite Lucille Ball and Gunsmoke, which were the number 1 and 2 shows. So the reason they bought Laugh-In is because it cost nothing, and it was they had to have something to put on opposite Lucy.
And it was a show for people who might not want to watch Lucy or Gunsmoke.
Nobody wanted.
You're not going to go up against Gunsmoke with another Western.
But what we would do is we would do it, and nobody wanted to do the show because we didn't have any money. So I would stop guest stars in the hall on the way back from the Johnny Carson show, and I would ask them to do the show. Like John Wayne said, "I'm not going to do that show with those crazy people." We put that on the air. So we lined up all of those cameo guest stars. And eventually,
it was just proximity, because you were at NBC in Burbank.
Down the hall, they had to come by our studio to get away from the Johnny Carson show. So they would stop by in the hall, right? And we would say, "Here, just say sock it to me." "I'm not gonna say sock it to me." Well, then we had that, right? So accident. We must treasure our accidents. We seek them, tolerate them, and enjoy them, and it'll make your life a little more amusing.
And sock it to me was now everybody talks about, well, what's viral? Sock it to me became a huge catchphrase.
Sock it to me was my Jolene.
Your wife came up with it. Well, came up with it.
There was a show. It was a rock and roll term, right?
It was the refrain of Aretha Franklin's "Respect."
That's right. Yeah, and respect, right?
Right.
And so Jolene said, "Well, you could do something like say sock it to me." I said, "Jolene, I can't say sock it to me. It has a mild kind of sexual reference and so forth." And in the back seat, we heard our little girl, who's an Emmy Award winner now, but she was a baby then. She said, "Sock it to me, sock it to me." I said, "Uh-oh, wait a minute." And
who is your daughter?
Maria Schlatter. She won an Emmy for the work she did with Dolly Parton. She's now writing a Broadway musical with Dolly Parton, and she's
terrific.
She's very, very bright, very, very funny, and funnier than I am, and much more articulate than I am.
My daughter is much funnier than I am, and she's
sure.
a paleontologist. She's a paleontologist.
What?
My daughter is much funnier than I am, and she's a paleontologist. She's up at
Can
Berkeley.
we interrupt this interview long enough for you to explain to me what a paleontologist is?
She studies fossils and dinosaurs.
Well, that shows you're devotion to interviewing me because I'm both.
Yeah, you'll be up at the museum in Berkeley in a couple of moments.
I may be in there sooner than that, on a shelf.
You were born in 1930?
1929. I
1929?
lied about my age once. Yeah.
Yeah, you're my father's age.
That isn't that wonderful that I'm your father's age, right?
But
but I'm not your grandfather's age,
nope.
know?
And you're both doing great. It's in Boston right now. It's 5:30, so he's already drinking. I don't know what you're doing.
I'm not doing that anymore. I was a lot more fun when I did, but I don't do that anymore. Accident played a large role in my success and in my life and in my marriage, certainly, because Jolene was not going to marry a guy that worked in nightclubs that was close to people in Vegas.
It's a very, I don't know if Zen would be the proper term, but you have to be open to what the universe throws you and not try to control everything that comes your way. It's, I often equate it to, when I learned how to surf, you have to let the wave run the show. You have to let go.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Let accidents happen, seek them and enjoy them.
Yeah, it's really true. There's something about Dan Rowan and Dick Martin that I wanted to get back to.
What's that?
The star of Laugh-In was that cast.
Yes.
Lily and to show you my connection to it very briefly. I have 4 older brothers and a younger sister, and they're all athletes and hunters. They're all policemen and things like that. And I was a scrawny kid, run to the litter, and I knew I was going to be a comedian from about kindergarten on.
Yeah, well,
and
good.
My first 2 bits, and my father would literally call me downstairs from bed and have me do my bits in front of his friends. No need for Freud. You don't need to see how I ended up doing what I did. My 2 bits were an impression of Richard Nixon and an impression of Ernestine.
Oh boy.
Those are my 2 impressions when I was 5. And I had a lot of miles off those 2.
Well, Lily came in and front of your eyes, Lily would become all of these different people. Ernestine was one, and the phone operator, and then the baby, and
the girl in the giant chair.
That's it. That was accident. That's what happened with the book. See, I sat down in my office with my assistant Martha, and I told all of these stories to Martha, and she wrote them all down, and then she typed it up and sent them to John Max, and with the instructions that they were going to remove all of my questionable relationships and adventures. So the book is funny. It avoided a lot of things that Jolene didn't want to read about.
Uh-huh. But this is what about Dan Rowan and Dick Martin. And I think more Dan than Dick didn't realize that they weren't the stars of the show.
No. That
never landed.
But that worked. See, I mean, the comedy happened around them. They were a great nightclub act. Dan was very literate and elegant and so on, and Dick was kind of semi-brain dead. And they came out and they did this act. And Dick never understood it, and Dan always explained it. And I didn't want to host in the show, but they were perfect to have the show happen around them, and that added a great deal to the show, although that was not the original concept.
And whether or not you intended it, for my father made Laugh-In okay for him to watch, because he wasn't a fan of hippies. He had the Joe Friday approach, but having these guys host the show made it safe for people to watch.
Ron Martin with an accident. I did a show called Turn On. Again, accident. It's another
I wanted to talk about Turn On.
Yeah, I mean, another show called Soul, which was the first all-black variety show with Red Fox's first time on television. And black people were not really featured on television. We came in with an entire show of black comics.
Right. And what year was Soul?
Soul was probably 1970, something like that.
It was before Sanford and Son.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
Red Fox, you couldn't put Red Fox on the air at that point. Well, I put him on. What I would do is I taped an hour and 10 minutes with Red Fox, and I took the 10 minutes out of that show that we could use, and Red Fox came on, and he was discovered, but we didn't do any of the material that he was famous for.
And what is, and tell us a little bit, now that we're talking about Red Fox, tell us a little about Norman, Is That You?
Well, Norman, Is That You? I wanted to do a movie, and a woman that I'd had great luck with, she was one of the dancers on Laugh-In, and Dick Martin always brought in dancers that he was having a relationship with, and one of these girls was this wonderful woman, and I looked at her and I said, whoa, now that's a woman that should be on the show. And she was on Laugh-In, but because Dick Martin promised all of these young women that they'd be on the show, this woman didn't get a lot of airtime. Her name was Sherry Lansing, and she went to that and eventually became head of MGM and bought Norman, Is That You? Which was a movie about, a gay movie, which at that point was a bit of adventure too,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But and Red and it's a cult hit. It's a cult film. But Red didn't promote it. He was a very, very
go on.
Red was in it for Red.
Red was an adventure, and what happened was we did the show.
Red was in it for Red.
And Red would not do any promotion unless they paid him $25,000 a day. I said, Red, why you can't do that? He said, well, they want me to promote their movie, my movie. It's not your movie. It's MGM's movie. It's Sherry Lansing's movie.
And it helps you if this is a hit.
But he would not do any promotion. And so the show did well and still runs as a cult movie. It was the first kind of gay movie with Pearl Bailey and Red Fox. To put Red Fox in a movie about a gay couple was an adventure, right?
And, big of him to do that at that time. What year and what was Turn On? How was Turn On different from Laugh-In, and why did you
Turn On? NBC came to me and Laugh-In, we can't to this day conceive of what a big hit Laugh-In was, because today you have more channels and more shows or whatever. We had just 3 channels, and Laugh-In came into this thing at 8:00 on Monday night.
I was aware of what Laugh-In was at 4 and 5 years old.
That's right. Well, see, because it captured your imagination. Your parents didn't understand it, but you understood stuff that they didn't get.
Right.
But that was part of the adventure.
Here's something else that I never realized until just now.
What's that?
For people my age, it had the same bright color palette as Sesame Street.
Oh, sure. It was before Sesame Street. Laugh-In.
Sesame Street was 69. You're right.
All those bright colors and bright costumes and bright people and hair and costumes and sets. Today, when you look at television today, it's all kind of dark and black. And so, because it's easier to light. Well, Laugh-In was impossible to light. We just flooded lights. And so when you looked at it, we called it eye candy.
Yeah.
And Turn On was a load of eye candy with, we stepped up the pace. So the Turn On was just brief mini shots, of things. And that
also had a pretty high caliber cast.
Oh yeah. But they it was too fast. They said you have to slow it down. And I took it I said the kids understand it and they're brighter than you are. So anyhow, but adventure, see, and Soul was another one, and then we did another show called Shape of Things, where it was all women. The entire show was written, produced, directed, and performed by women. And at that point, the network went, well, why are we doing this thing about women? I said, because they're much more interesting than you. And again, that's what got me a lot of trouble, but it's also what paid for the mortgage. So when they had a problem with a time period, I would get a call. Can you do anything there? And that's what happened with Soul and The Shape of Things and Ghosts, Goblins, and Kids. We did a show with all children, Jane North and Teddy Rooney. And what I would do is look for an impossible situation and then come in with a suggestion. And I got by with it.
And that's interesting too, because as you say, they didn't get Laugh-In.
No.
It was originally just a special, correct?
Yeah.
And then they ordered it to series. And then they go to you for everything.
They didn't have anything else to put on opposite of Lucille Ball and Gunsmoke. And so I said, I'll give you this show. It cost nothing. And they didn't know any of the people. The guest stars were people I'd stop in the hall and ask them to do one-liners. And out of that, impossible situation came a beautiful accident. And it happened like that with the Shape of Things, which is all about women, and Soul, which was all about black and white, and Children Are People was all about children. So a lot of my successes were born out of the element of impossible situations.
One of the things that your book also makes clear, that as much as you say, your first line is George Schlatter, oh yeah, created laughing. You are something of you are seem so skilled.
Careful.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, what?
All good. I'll build up to the big close, and then we'll talk about it.
That's all right.
Then we'll talk about what Dan Rowan and Milton Berle have in common aside from being comedians. But building up to that, you seem to have an effortless ability to deal with difficult personalities.
Invent difficult,
but also like dealing with divas, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Despite their gender. And none more so in the stories that I have heard than Jerry Lewis.
Yes.
Famously, every aspect of Jerry Lewis on stage and off stage, he was to whatever that was the way a skunk is to smell. You couldn't be more Jerry Lewis than Jerry Lewis. And if he was an asshole, he was the biggest asshole on the planet. And if he was funny, he was the funniest guy on the planet. Like everything was on 11 with Jerry.
Yes, I had a wonderful relationship with Jerry.
You worked with him on, was it the 25th anniversary of the telethon?
I did a lot of stuff with Jerry, yeah.
Yeah. But talk a little about how do you tame Jerry? Because when certain people, you don't. Okay.
You don't. You enjoy the experience, you know.
But you've got to wrangle. But you have to wrangle these people. Like I was a writer on The Simpsons for a long time, and we'd have people come in to do voices, and some people come in great, pros come in, and some people big stars. It's a dance, and you have to know how to direct the wind, you know.
You have to know how to enjoy the flaw. And
well put.
Those people were awful. Jerry Lewis was flawed, but and you could make Jerry laugh. But you had to do something with Jerry that was unpredictable, and I could make Jerry Lewis laugh, and that was the secret to my relationship with Jerry.
That was it.
So it's difficult when we're talking about this, like it's a third person, but it's difficult to kind of synthesize or capture now what it was without showing it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this interesting. It's the guy jumping out of the 50th story of a building, right? And he jumps out of the window, and all the way down, people heard him say, "So far, so good." That's kind of my career. So far, so good. You knew eventually it was going to hit bottom, but while it was on its way, it was an adventure. That was my relationship with Jerry and with Cher. I have a wonderful relationship. I love Cher. And she came to the Grammys the other night, and she walked over and she said, "Hello, Hammer." And I realized that my relationship with Cher was based upon my inability to convince her gently to do what I wanted her to do. So I would convince her forcefully to do it. And so
she called you Hammer and you called her Nails.
Nails. And she started calling me, "Okay, Hammer." But she was an enormously talented woman.
For people who don't know what a producer does, for Sonny and Cher had this variety show on CBS. It was huge. Yes. They were basically the counterculture Lucy and Desi.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a very high profile divorce, and she does a show on her own, and she's terrified because she sees herself as a rock and roll queen.
That's right.
But that's not going to work in middle class living rooms.
Yes. So I told her, I said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to be off in the distance with a little pin spot. And I want you to say, 'Let me entertain you.' Just a very quiet ballad with no choir." She said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, trust me. Just sing, 'Let me entertain you. Let me show.'" And I get to a chorus of that, and then we'll bring up the lights and you walk down. And she says, "Boy, that's the squarest thing I ever heard." I said, "You're right. But you're divorced from Sonny now, and people are looking for you to do something." She said, "Well, then what?" And so I said, "Well, then you come down and you sing and you start to do all these different things." She said, "Boy, Hammer, that's the worst idea I ever heard." I said, "Well, I've got worse than that." But Cher was magic. I mean, she, and of course, the relationship with Sonny. So Sonny was always telling her what to do. So she wasn't going to let another man tell her what to do. And I almost made it a few times, but we won Emmys and everything with Cher. I love Cher.
That's a great, that's a great example though of talent meeting opportunity in both of your cases, where you are to producing television what she is to singing and being a star, that you were equals, and you had to allow her to be her and then gently steer her into what you knew would work.
I'm kind of like what an avalanche is to a mountain. Without the avalanche, the mountain's kind of boring, but when you have the avalanche coming down there, that's what you want to look at. It happened with me and Danny Thomas, me and Jackie Gleason, all of those people. When I walked in, I wasn't what they wanted or what they expected.
Sure.
And into those relationships, accident happened.
Yeah. And there's a great story in the book with, I believe it was with Judy Garland. And, you talk about, how old were you when you worked with Judy Garland?
God, I was probably 40 something.
Yeah. Legendary, difficult personnel. A diva's diva. And they stick you with Judy Garland. And you're dealing with a guy named Hunt Stromberg Jr.
Oh, God, Hunt Stromberg. Yes.
Tell me about Hunt Stromberg, and then I'll tell you my Hunt Stromberg story.
I wanted to do the Judy Garland show, and she was known to be very, very difficult.
Sure.
And I just wanted to meet her. And I knew that I could handle Judy Garland because I had Dinah or whatever. So I met her there about 9:30 at night. I was still in the office, and they said, "Come downstairs." And I came down, and there was Judy. And I remember here was this tiny little woman with this image of force field of energy and Judy type. And I didn't know what to say. So I said, I don't care what you heard about me. There's no truth to the rumor that I'm difficult. And she looked at me, she said, "You're difficult?" I said, "See, even you heard it." She said, "You're difficult?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I'll show you difficult." So my first meeting with her maybe lasted under 15 seconds because we went out and drank some Blue Nun Lieb from Ilch. But from that came a relationship with she constantly tested me, and she constantly would try to get my attention with different things, And so our relationship with Judy was successful because it was an adventure, and it focused on, we must look upon accidents as an opportunity. Change the word accident to opportunity. And that was my relationship with Judy.
And then was it Hunt Stromberg who fired you?
Yeah. They said, "We want Judy Garland to be," said, "George, you're doing all of this stuff with all of these things and doing all the crazy things with Judy Garland. We want Judy to be the girl next door." And I said, "Well, you've got the wrong woman. That's not the girl next door. Nobody lives next door to anybody like Judy Garland."
Yeah, she was a girl next door when she was 14.
That's right. And so they said, "Well, we want you to do a more normal show like you did with Dinah." I said, "But Judy Garland is not Dinah. I love Dinah, but it's different people." So anyhow, I'd done like 5 shows in 6 weeks. Everybody was raving about the shows, but it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted me to do with Judy what I'd done with Dinah. And so Freddie Fields and Hunt and David Beagleman stopped me in the hall. They said, "We got to talk to you." I said, "Not now. I'm on the way to rehearsal." They said, "No, you're not."
The biggest personality that you're well known for is that you and the chairman of the board, Francis Albert Sinatra, were incredibly close.
Yes. I had fun with him. Oh.
And were not only worked together, but became very, very close friends. And you met him, I believe it was at William Morris before you even worked there.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I got together with Frank, and I could make him laugh. And the secret to Frank Sinatra was making him laugh. and it was dangerous.
And yet he was still friends with Joey Bishop.
Well, yeah, and he was great with Don Rickles, you know.
Yeah.
Frank. Everybody was so afraid of Frank Sinatra that if you walked in and you weren't afraid of him, that immediately caught his attention, you know.
Tell me about the big story that you talk about in the book, and I can't recommend the book more. Is
please try.
When you bring Frank's, I believe it's America Comes Home, the Gulf War special.
Yeah,
and it's you're with Frank Sinatra, and you're with a bunch of presidents.
Yeah,
and you're there with the Secret Service, and George H.W. Bush comes out and they play "Hail to the Chief."
Yeah,
and then you say, well, then Frank Sinatra's going to come out, and you make a big faux pas. You say, what if we play "Hail to the Chief" for Frank too?
That's right. That's right.
Terrible silence.
And it is silent. And there's not and everybody's looking at me like, are you fucking crazy? Right. And we played Hail to the Chief for Frank Sinatra. And Frank liked it. But the president and the people around the president were not too crazy when they heard Hail to the Chief for Frank Sinatra. But Frank laughed. See, humor is the panacea. Nobody ever throws a punch when they're laughing. So my career, as shabby or whatever it has been most of my problems have been solved by the ability to laugh and to make people laugh. And and I survived all of that. Nixon, Trump.
Yeah. No, it's great. And what I love about your book is, and this is something that I aspire to, you're not grinding axes. It's just a lot of fond and crazy and hilarious stories about people that you know, but it isn't, there's no bile. It's not score settling. It's not petty. It's a pleasure to read. And you know more than me because you're older and you've seen more, but a lot of times, you know, your mantra is embrace the accident. My mantra is like a lot of times, not always, but whether you're happy or angry, a lot of times it's a choice.
Always a choice.
You have a very successful marriage, which is
Yes.
rare for anybody. That's
65 years.
That's a choice. At a certain point, it becomes, we have chosen to make this marriage work, and we have chosen to stay together, and we're going to make it work. And a lot of times it's what you decide to do and how you look at your life and how you look at your work and the people that you deal with.
And also how lucky you are in finding that person to take the chance with, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Jolene was gorgeous. She was a hell of an actress. She was a great comedian. Ernie Kovacs loved her, and the Zorro people loved her, and Desi Arnaz thought she was the greatest thing ever. But she really wasn't obsessed with a career. But she has been obsessed with us and having our two daughters, Maria, who was a major gift, and AJ is another gift. And so we have quite a life. And now I meet you, and so I may have to adopt you now too.
Oh, come on over. I'm easy going.
You're
but
at the right age.
But it's also and you have one of those great classic stories. You know, it's really, you know, because you're a very talented guy. You're very funny, but you're not no one's version of a matinee idol.
Nope.
Same with me. I look like my favorite shoe. And
good.
My wife is also much more beautiful than anybody I should be with. But because you're funny, you can make them laugh.
That's the secret. The secret and lucky. The other thing is funny and lucky. Those two things.
For sure.
And I'm talking to you. That's lucky and funny both. So here we go.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Are you working on something new? You working on something new?
Yeah. Well, the book, I'm really happy. I'm really happy with the book because
is this also on audio yet for people?
Yeah, it's coming out on audio next. You know.
Did you read it yourself?
I wrote it. I didn't write it. I dictated it, and then Martha.
No, did you read the audiobook, or did somebody read it for you?
They want me to.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, and the book is called Still Laughing. It's by George Schlatter. It was a real pleasure. I hope I bump into you soon.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. You be well, Mr. Schlatter.
Oh, you too. Now behave.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould Hour.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out! You want me? Peace out! Boom.